So a tiny bit about me. Real quick, I've been an educator now for 24 years. I started when I was in high school, working at after-school programs, summer camps. My mom was a teacher growing up, so I used to spend a lot of time in her classroom. And big aha moment for me was when I first got involved in experiential education. So when I was working for Outward Bound, leading trips for Windsor Mountain, Interlochen Crossroads. I've worked with so many of the organizations in this field. Just seeing that the approach to really meaningful experiences is exactly what high schoolers, teenagers, adolescents need if they're making this transition into adulthood. I can talk a little bit more about later about how I ended up at Global Roots and why that's been a place that I've remained over the last 13 years, despite a lot of other opportunities out there. But it's such a huge opportunity to get out there and make a huge difference in your life. So yeah, one question I have is we're going through this, if you're listening to this, there's always a really interesting mix of excitement and anxiety or concern about an international program. I'd love to hear from people that are with us live. What's the biggest fear about either sending your son or daughter abroad, or if you're a student about going abroad? What's terrifying about choosing a program? I'd love to hear from people that are live with us. Nervous about a homestay experience. So Stuart, if you're considering a homestay, yeah, that's something that people, the idea of staying in someone else's home, that can be pretty nerve-wracking. That's definitely a central component of a lot of programs, probably, for students, the most meaningful part of some study abroad programs. So yeah, totally normal. Organizations that do run homestays, Global Roots is one of the organizations that does run homestays, so that may be why you're asking that. It's something that is the central focus of our program prep, of working with our in-country staff to select homestay families that are in line with our policies and procedures, safety policies, risk management protocol. But it's also like the most warmth-centered part of the program. A lot of students are really nervous about the language component. What if I can't speak to my family or my parents, my brothers and sisters? And that's something that I think students, especially if they're in a place where they maybe haven't learned the language, like Nepal or Tanzania, it's being able to learn how to communicate non-verbally and get that message across that can be one of like the greatest lessons for people. It's a great question. It's something that I know when I first did my first homestay in Guatemala when I was young, something that I was nervous about and ended up being the highlight of a 5-month trip in Central America. Awesome. And I can see one or two people are still typing. I'm going to move to the next slide, but I'm still going to answer the question once it comes in. Yeah, and one thing I wanted to mention, yeah, for people that do stick at the end, to the end, a lot of information to share, but we do have a little bonus gift for you. And I've got another question that came in. So Summit's 14, travels a family to visit extended family in India. Awesome. One of my favorite places on earth. Accustomed to long flights. In concern about language and homestay. Totally, yeah. I mean, these are, especially as a parent, those are some of the most significant questions that we receive, and something that I usually recommend more than anything. I can speak quite a bit about all our policies and procedures and what we've done over the last 53 years to run really transformative homestays. But I think also speaking to, if you're really interested in the Global Roots program, for example, I can put you in touch with alumni families who can talk a little bit more about their experience. What was their son or daughter's experience with the homestay? What concerns did they have going into it, and what did they realize by the end of the program? And I think it's such a good example that you have a son that's traveled with you quite a bit. Being able to go on a broad program independently is such an important next step for them to take some of the tools that they have learned traveling with their family and be able to start to implement those independently with the guidance of their leaders and the rest of the group. Another great question is, it's all individual experience or students travel with a group? Well, in this field in general, I'm speaking a little bit more generally about the study abroad field for high school students and college students as well. There's a variety for high school students. I think for a 14-year-old, you would most likely want to be looking into a group experience. So a group of students with professional leaders, so that this experience is supervised, highly cultivated, and that your son would have the staff support to be able to help them get the most out of the experience, especially using the experiential education lens as a learning tool.